Here's a number the food industry doesn't want you doing math on. The average acre of American corn produces roughly 10,260 pounds of grain per year. That yield requires synthetic nitrogen fertilizer manufactured from natural gas through the Haber-Bosch process, herbicide applications, diesel-powered planting and harvesting equipment, and a distribution chain that moves the crop from Midwestern fields to processing plants to grocery shelves across the country. Strip out the fossil fuel inputs and that yield collapses. The entire industrial food system, the one your grocery store depends on, is built on cheap energy. And cheap energy is the one thing history has refused to guarantee. But here's what the industrial model didn't tell you. Those yield numbers for corn, wheat, and soy, the benchmarks that make industrial agriculture look like the only viable food system, are not the ceiling of what land can produce. Not even close. Peer-reviewed research documents crops that produce more calories per square foot, more protein per acre, and more complete nutrition per pound than anything in your grocery store, without fossil fuel fertilizer, without combine harvesters, some of them without being planted at all. This is 10 of those crops. Every yield number in this video is from documented research or measured field production. Every crop has a direct head-to-head comparison against the industrial product it outperforms. And every one of them is something you can grow this season, in your backyard, in a container, or on land most people already have. Well, if that's the kind of information that changes how you think about food independence, hit subscribe right now. Because by the time most people understand that a 3-day supply chain is not food security, you'll already have these systems in the ground and producing. The plants exist. The data exists. The window to plant is open right now. Let's go. Number 10, kale and tree collards. You're buying the least productive version of the most nutrient-dense green that exists, and nobody told you the perennial variety never stops producing. The kale at the grocery store is an annual. Planted once, harvested once, shipped, sold. A typical commercial kale field produces one harvest per growing season and is then replanted. That is the version most people know. Tree collards, Brassica oleracea, at the perennial form, produce continuously for 5 to 10 years from a single planting in zones 7 and warmer. You harvest the outer leaves repeatedly throughout the growing season. The plant keeps growing from the center, and it comes back the following spring without any intervention. In mild climates, it produces through winter. You are not comparing one crop to one harvest. You are comparing one planting to a decade of continuous production. No replanting, no seed buying, no annual restart. Here is what kale delivers per square foot. A well-managed 10 by 10 foot kale bed yields 1 to 1.5 pounds of greens per square foot per growing season. 100 to 150 pounds from 100 square feet. Per pound, kale contains more calcium than milk, more vitamin C than oranges, more vitamin K than almost any other food. The calorie count is low, around 50 calories per pound, but no plant in the grocery store delivers as much micronutrient density per square foot of growing space. Nothing comes close. Tree collards in zones 7 and warmer. Plant once from a cutting, harvest for 10 years. The plant grows 6 to 8 feet tall, produces continuously, and the leaves stay tender and edible throughout. Cuttings root easily in water, no seeds required. You multiply your stock for free. At the store, organic kale runs $3 to $5 per bunch, roughly half a pound. A 100 square foot bed, producing 150 pounds at $4 per pound, is $600 worth of greens per season. From a planting you never repeat. Why it's on the list. In any food security scenario, micronutrient deficiency is the quiet killer. You can have enough calories and still have your immune system fail, or your bones weaken, your vision deteriorate, because the calories came without the vitamins and minerals your body needs to function. Kale solves more micronutrient gaps per square foot than anything else you can grow. 0 inputs once established. Harvest continuously. The most nutritionally productive green in this video. Number 9, sweet potatoes, more calories per acre than regular potatoes in warm climates. Without irrigation, without fertilizer, and the vines root themselves as they grow. Regular potatoes average 20,000 pounds per acre in the United States with full irrigation and synthetic fertilizer. Sweet potatoes in warm climates with minimal inputs regularly match that number. And in intensive home production, the gap widens in sweet potatoes' favor. A well-managed 100 square foot bed in a warm climate produces 200 to 300 pounds per harvest. That's 2 to 3 pounds per square foot. At 400 calories per pound, that's 800 to 1,200 calories per square foot from a single planting. Here's the self-propagating reality most gardeners miss. Sweet potato vines root wherever they touch the ground. A single slip, a rooted cutting from one tuber, produces a vine that covers 20 to 30 square feet, roots itself at multiple contact points, and produces tubers at every root zone. In zones 9 and warmer, leave a few tubers in the ground, and the crop reestablishes itself the following season. No replanting. In colder zones, save a few tubers to produce next year's slips indoors in late winter, zones 8 through 11 as perennials. Annual production possible in zone 5 and warmer, with a long enough frost-free season. Full sun. Sandy to loamy, well-drained soil. They actually prefer poor soil. Rich, heavily fertilized ground grows enormous vines and small tubers. Neglect improves the yield. Nutritionally, sweet potatoes outperform regular potatoes on vitamin A by a factor of hundreds, not percent, hundreds, and deliver comparable amounts of vitamin C, potassium, and B6. The orange-fleshed varieties contain more beta-carotene per pound than almost any food in commercial production. At the store, sweet potatoes run $1.50 to $2.50 per pound. A 100 square foot bed, producing 250 pounds at $2 per pound, is $500 worth of food per season, from vines that reestablish themselves in warm climates without any help from you. Why it's on the list: calorie density, self-propagation, drought tolerance, and nutritional completeness in a crop that thrives on poor soil and low inputs. In any scenario where supply chains tighten and grocery prices climb, a sweet potato bed in a warm climate is producing 800 to 1,200 calories per square foot, whether or not the system is working. Number 8, winter squash. One vine, 30 square feet. 12 months of shelf-stable calories. No refrigeration required. One winter squash seed. One vine covering 25 to 50 square feet by midsummer. One fall harvest of 15 to 35 pounds of dense calorie-rich food that stores at room temperature. No refrigeration, no canning, no processing. For 6 to 12 months, depending on variety. That storage number is the one most people underweight. At the grocery store, and almost everything calorie-dense requires refrigeration or freezing to last more than a week. Winter squash, butternut, Hubbard, kabocha, Long Island cheese pumpkin, cures at room temperature, stores in a cool, dry place, and maintains full nutritional value for months without any energy input after harvest. That is not a gardening convenience. That is food security infrastructure that works without electricity. Here is the calorie math on a single productive plant. A mature butternut squash plant, producing 25 pounds of fruit at 360 calories per pound, delivers 9,000 calories. A kabocha plant producing 30 pounds at 430 calories per pound delivers nearly 13,000 calories from one seed on 30 to 50 square feet, harvested once and stored without energy. The seeds are edible too, high in zinc, magnesium, and fat, at roughly 600 calories per pound when dried. Nothing goes to waste. Full sun, moderate water. A single compost application at planting covers most nutrient needs. The harvest window is September through October for most varieties. Cure for 2 to 4 weeks in a warm, dry location. Store at 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Hubbard and Long Island cheese pumpkin varieties are documented to store reliably for over a year. The industrial food system can't scale winter squash efficiently. The vines sprawl and resist mechanized harvesting. The fruit bruises during mechanical collection. So the grocery store stocks varieties selected for transport durability rather than calorie density or storage life, a smaller, blander version of what's possible. Why it's on the list. Shelf-stable calories without energy input. Show one seed producing 9,000 to 13,000 calories of food that stores for up to a year at room temperature. In any scenario where refrigeration is unreliable or supply chains are disrupted, winter squash is the crop that's still feeding people 6 months after harvest without a single piece of infrastructure support. Number 7, cowpeas and black-eyed peas. More protein per acre than almost anything the grocery store sells, and they build the soil while they grow. Here is what soybeans do. They produce about 2,700 to 3,500 pounds of dry beans per acre at 25% protein by dry weight, roughly 700 to 875 pounds of protein per acre. The soy supply chain requires mechanized harvesting, industrial processing to remove anti-nutrients, and transcontinental transportation to reach your grocery shelf. The crop depletes soil nitrogen and requires synthetic replacement. Here is what cowpeas do differently. They fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil through root nodules, up to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre per season. They build fertility as they produce. On poor, sandy, degraded soil that wouldn't support most crops, cowpeas yield 1,500 to 3,000 pounds of dry beans per acre at 23 to 25% protein by dry weight. They produce food and simultaneously replenish the soil they're growing in. You end the season with more fertility than you started with. No synthetic fertilizer, no soil depletion. The heat tolerance is the adaptation most people miss. Vigna unguiculata evolved in sub-Saharan Africa. At 100 degrees Fahrenheit, when kidney beans and black beans are wilting and dropping flowers, cowpeas keep producing. On 400 millimeters of annual rainfall, 15 inches, they produce food where most other beans fail. In zones 7 through 11, they're the most reliable warm season protein crop available. Dried cowpeas store for 2 to 3 years without refrigeration. The leaves and young pods are edible fresh, providing continuous harvest before the dry bean crop matures. 1 acre of cowpeas in a crop rotation replaces 200 pounds of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer the following season. At 50 cents per pound for nitrogen, conservative pricing, that's $100 per acre in fertilizer value on top of the food produced. The crop feeds you and feeds your soil simultaneously. No other plant on this list does both. Why it's on the list. Heat-tolerant, drought-resistant, soil-building protein that stores for years without refrigeration. Or in any scenario where supply chain access to protein becomes unreliable, cowpeas produce in the conditions where most other crops fail and leave the ground more fertile than they found it. Number 6, potatoes in towers and bags. The same 4 square feet of ground produces 10 times the yield when you grow vertically. Industrial potato production averages 20,000 pounds per acre, roughly 0.46 pounds per square foot. That is the flat field, spread out, mechanized harvest number. It's also the number that determines how much land most people think they need to produce meaningful potato yields. Here is what changes when you grow vertically. The potato plant produces tubers along its stem wherever that stem is underground. Traditional growing buries the seed potato 4 to 6 inches deep, and that's where tubers form. Our tower growing starts with the same planting depth and adds soil incrementally as the plant grows upward, covering the new stem as it emerges, triggering tuber formation at every buried node all the way up the column. You are not growing 1 layer of potatoes. You are growing 4 to 6 layers in the same horizontal footprint. A 4 square foot fabric bag or wire tower producing 100 pounds of potatoes is documented regularly in intensive home production. That's 25 pounds per square foot compared to 0.46 pounds per square foot in conventional production. Even at conservative yields, 40 to 60 pounds from a 4 square foot container, you're producing 10 to 15 pounds per square foot, 10 to 30 times the conventional yield from the same ground. At 350 to 400 calories per pound, as a 4 square foot tower producing 60 pounds delivers 22,000 calories from 4 square feet in one season. The technique requires good drainage, consistent moisture, and incremental soil addition as the plant grows. Every 6 to 8 inches of new stem growth, add 4 to 6 inches of compost or soil mix. Fabric grow bags or stacked wire cylinders work better than solid-walled containers because of drainage and airflow. All Blue, Yukon Gold, and Kennebec are reliable tower varieties. Full sun required. Why it's on the list. If you are growing food in a constrained space, a backyard, a patio, a balcony, vertical potato production changes the yield math fundamentally. The same footprint that produces 20 pounds of potatoes in a flat garden bed produces 60 to 100 pounds in a tower. That is not marginal improvement. That is a different category of food production from the same land. Number 5. Amaranth, complete protein, 14% by weight. The Aztec Empire ran on it. The Spanish burned the fields under penalty of death to suppress it. It grows in zones 2 through 11 and costs almost nothing. In 1519, Hernán Cortés banned amaranth cultivation across the Aztec Empire. Not because it was dangerous, because it worked too well. The Aztec capital received 20,000 tons of amaranth grain as annual tribute. The tax system of the most advanced civilization in the Western Hemisphere ran partially on amaranth. And Cortés understood what every conqueror understands. A population feeding itself on a crop that grows in any soil, in any climate, without inputs, is a population you cannot control. So he burned the fields and threatened amputation for anyone caught growing it. That was 500 years ago. The yield data has not changed. Amaranth grain is 14% protein by dry weight and contains all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine, the amino acid that's deficient in corn, wheat, and rice. That's not a marginal difference. Lysine deficiency is the primary driver of protein malnutrition in grain-dependent populations worldwide. A civilization eating amaranth as its primary grain does not have that deficiency. A civilization eating corn does. The Aztecs were not eating the inferior crop. A single amaranth plant yields up to a quarter pound of grain. Densely planted in a 10 by 10 foot bed, you produce 5 to 10 pounds of grain per season. The leaves are edible within 30 days of planting, more iron per pound than spinach, are more calcium than kale, providing a continuous green harvest while the grain head develops. 2 crops from one plant in one season. Zones 2 through 11. Every climate in America. Poor soil, drought, heat that wilts other crops. It tolerates all of it. It matures in 90 to 120 days. It self-sows aggressively. Let a few seed heads fall, and it comes back the following season without replanting. Grain stores for years in a cool, dry place. Why it's on the list. Complete protein that grows in any climate zone, in soil industrial crops would refuse, with 0 inputs and self-sows indefinitely. The Spanish Empire burned fields and cut off hands to prevent people from growing this. Ask yourself why. A population with this crop needs nothing from a conqueror. In a scenario where supply chain access to protein becomes unreliable, amaranth grows anywhere and produces everything a grain crop is supposed to produce, and more. Number 4, moringa. The WHO deploys it in famine zones because nothing the grocery store sells matches it nutritionally. It grows 20 feet in a single year and asks for the worst soil you have. The World Health Organization, UNICEF, and dozens of international NGOs don't promote moringa because it's a trendy wellness ingredient. They deploy it in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America as a famine intervention tool. because when a population is eating sufficient calories but dying of micronutrient deficiency, the quiet crisis that runs alongside every serious food disruption, moringa is the fastest, cheapest, most sustainable correction available. Here is what the nutritional analysis shows per pound of moringa leaves against the foods it outperforms. 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, 4 times the calcium of milk, 3 times the potassium of bananas, 2 times the protein of yogurt, 25 times the iron of spinach. Those ratios are from peer-reviewed nutritional research, not supplement marketing. They are the numbers that explain why field organizations use moringa as their intervention of first choice. Now here is the per square foot production reality. Moringa oleifera grows 15 to 20 feet in a single year. One tree occupies 10 to 15 square feet of ground space. Managed as a cut-and-come-again crop, harvested to a manageable height and allowed to re-sprout from the stump, that tree produces 100 to 200 pounds of edible leaves per season. Per square foot of ground occupied, a managed moringa tree delivers more micronutrients than any other plant in commercial food production. Zones 9 through 13 as a perennial. The same stump regrows aggressively after each cutting for decades. No replanting needed, no fertilization required. It prefers poor, sandy, well-drained soil that most food crops refuse to grow in. No serious pest problems. In colder zones, start seeds indoors 6 weeks before last frost. Transplant after nights stay above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Treat as an annual. A single-season plant that still reaches 6 to 10 feet and produces hundreds of leaves before frost. Dry the leaves on a screen in shade for 2 to 3 days. Crumble into powder, store sealed for over a year. 1 tablespoon of moringa powder added to your daily food covers the micronutrient gaps that lead to immune collapse, anemia, bone loss, and scurvy in any diet built primarily on starchy calories. Why it's on the list. When your diet narrows to staple calories during any disruption, grains, tubers, legumes, micronutrient deficiency starts doing damage within weeks. Moringa prevents every major deficiency simultaneously from a tree that grows in the worst soil with 0 inputs. The WHO knows this. That's why they're distributing it in famine zones, while most American gardeners have never heard the word. Number 3, sun chokes. 64,000 pounds per acre without irrigation. Potatoes average 20,000 with full irrigation and synthetic fertilizer. One 17th century farmer's bad review sidelined this crop for 400 years. Then a study conducted in Oregon measured sunchoke yields under real field conditions without irrigation. The result? 64,000 pounds per acre. The national average for potato production in the United States is 20,000 pounds per acre. With irrigation, with synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, with annual replanting of seed potatoes. Sunchokes produced more than 3 times the potato yield. Without irrigation, without fertilizer. Without replanting, because sunchokes are perennial, leave a few tubers in the ground and they come back the following season and every season after that indefinitely. Do the math on what that yield difference means per square foot. Conventional potatoes, 0.46 pounds per square foot. Sunchokes under the Oregon study conditions, 1.47 pounds per square foot. From a perennial crop that costs nothing after the first planting, requires no irrigation in most climates, and spreads aggressively without any help. At 400 calories per pound, that's 588 calories per square foot of permanent zero-input production. Helianthus tuberosus, Jerusalem artichoke, sunchoke, native to eastern North America, cultivated by indigenous peoples for over 3,000 years. Introduced to Europe in the early 1600s, briefly a staple food, then an English farmer named John Goodyear wrote in 1617 that sunchokes were more fit for swine than men because of the digestive gas they caused. That review, 400 years old, is substantially responsible for the fact that the most calorie-productive perennial root crop in North America is absent from most people's gardens. The gas is real. The fix is simple. Sunchokes are high in inulin, a carbohydrate your small intestine can't digest, which passes to the large intestine where bacteria ferment it. Slow roasting at low temperatures for 45 to 60 minutes breaks the inulin down significantly. So does boiling and cooling or fermentation. Traditional preparation across every culture that relied on sunchokes involved extended cooking. The plant was not the problem. A 17th century Englishman who boiled them for 20 minutes and blamed the food was the problem. Zones 3 through 9, full sun to partial shade, clay, sandy, or rocky soil, they do not care. No irrigation needed in most climates, no fertilization required, no replanting. The tubers store in the ground all winter. You dig when you need food and leave the rest alone. The ground is your refrigerator. The plant manages itself. Why it's on the list. 3 times the yield of conventional potatoes with 0 inputs. From a perennial that spreads on its own and stores underground without infrastructure. Sidelined for 400 years because of one bad review. That is not a failure of the crop. Number 2. Cattails. 6,475 pounds of flour equivalent per acre from a plant nobody planted, nobody waters, and nobody fertilizes. It's already growing in the ditch at the end of your street. The U.S. Army Field Research Laboratory studied cattail starch during World War II specifically as a high-calorie field food source for soldiers cut off from supply lines. The documented result: 1 acre of cattail rhizomes produces the flour equivalent of 6,475 pounds per year. No cultivated grain crop produces that number without fossil fuel fertilizer inputs. Wheat averages 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of flour equivalent per acre with full synthetic inputs. Cattail, a wild plant growing in standing water that no farmer planted, produces more than double. And that 6,475 pounds is only the rhizome starch. Every other part of the plant is also edible. The young shoots in spring taste like cucumber, eaten raw or cooked. The immature flower spikes before they turn brown, boiled and eaten off the spike like corn on the cob. Not a metaphor. The texture and eating method are genuinely identical. The pollen in early summer, collected from the male flowers in bags, a high-protein flour supplement mixed 50-50 with rhizome starch for a complete baking flour. The seeds, pressable into oil. 0 inputs, 0 planting. No fertilization required. No irrigation needed. No replanting. No pest control. No maintenance of any kind. The plant manages itself. Dortypha latifolia grows in zones 2 through 11, essentially the entire planet's temperate zones. Every wetland, pond edge, drainage ditch, rain garden, and low-lying area with consistent moisture in America already has cattails or could establish them within 2 seasons from a transplanted rhizome section. The Army confirmed the yield. The research went into a file and was ignored because no combine harvester can process a wetland plant. No corporation can build an industrial food business around something that grows wild for free. So the most calorie-productive per-acre plant documented without fossil fuel inputs sits unharvested in every ditch in every state, while the food system you depend on runs on 3-day inventory cycles. Why it's on the list. The highest flour equivalent yield of any plant documented without fossil fuel inputs. Are already growing everywhere. 0 cost to establish. Every part edible. The only obstacle between you and that food source is the knowledge that it exists. And now you have it. Number 1. Duckweed. 45% protein. Doubles every 48 hours. Uses no farmland. Produces 35 times more protein per acre than soybeans. The food industry has no mechanism to profit from it, so you've never heard of it. This is the one that requires you to hold the numbers before moving on. Duckweed, Lemna minor and related species, is the small floating plant that covers the surface of still ponds. You have seen it your entire life. Green, tiny, like a carpet on the water. You have probably assumed it was algae or pond scum. It's food. It has been food in Southeast Asia for centuries. In Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar, duckweed is consumed under the name kai nam, water eggs, harvested from rice paddies and slow-moving streams, sun-dried and used in salads, soups, and as a protein supplement. It is a traditional staple food consumed by millions of people with zero safety issues and zero documented toxicity. This is not experimental food. This is traditional food that the Western food system decided wasn't worth developing because there was no profit in something that grows wild for free. Here are the yield numbers. Under optimal conditions, duckweed doubles its biomass every 24 to 48 hours. Not every season, every 48 hours. A pound becomes 2 pounds in 2 days. Those 2 pounds become 4 pounds 2 days later. Controlled cultivation yields 13 to 40 tons of dry biomass per acre per year, multiple times higher than any terrestrial crop on this list. Now the protein number. Duckweed is 35 to 45% protein by dry weight. Soybeans, the crop the entire industrial protein supply chain was built around, are 36% protein by dry weight. Soybeans require arable land, annual planting, fossil fuel fertilizer, and mechanized harvesting. Duckweed grows on water. It requires no arable land at all. It grows on ponds, slow streams, aquaculture tanks, kiddie pools, and any still water surface with basic nutrient levels. At 40 tons per acre at 40% protein, duckweed produces 16 tons of protein per acre per year. Soybeans produce approximately 700 to 900 pounds of protein per acre per year. Our duckweed produces 35 to 45 times more protein per acre. That number is peer-reviewed. NASA has studied duckweed as a food source for long-term space missions. The European Food Safety Authority has assessed it as safe for human consumption. The research is there. The data is there. The reason you've never seen it at the grocery store, the reason there is no duckweed section in the produce aisle, no duckweed supply chain, no duckweed lobby, is that no corporation can build a profitable monoculture around a plant that grows wild in every pond in America, doubles in 48 hours, and costs nothing to establish. You cannot patent it. You cannot create a seed dependency. You cannot make it proprietary. There is no marketing budget because there is no revenue stream. So it sits in every pond in every state, doubling every 2 days, or producing 35 times the protein of soybeans per acre, and the food industry walks past it. How to grow it? Fill any container with water, a tub, a kiddie pool, a small pond, a stock tank. Add a basic nutrient solution, diluted compost tea, fish emulsion, or aquarium water. Introduce a small amount of duckweed from a local pond or an online supplier. Keep it in full to partial sun. Harvest 20 to 30% of the surface every few days. The plant replaces the harvested portion within 48 to 72 hours. Rinse the harvest thoroughly. Sun-dry and store as powder, or use fresh in salads, soups, or blended into anything. Dried duckweed powder is shelf-stable for months and incorporates into any recipe that needs a protein addition. Nutritional profile beyond protein, significant omega-3 fatty acids. Complete essential amino acid profile including all 9 essentials, vitamin A, calcium, iron. Per dry ounce, duckweed matches or exceeds soy protein on essential amino acid balance. The crop requires no arable land, no planting, no harvesting machinery, no fertilizer, and no supply chain after the initial setup. Why it's on the list? The highest yielding protein source food scientists have documented. Grows without arable land. Doubles every 48 hours. Has been safely consumed as traditional food for centuries across Southeast Asia. Being studied by NASA for survival food applications. Ignored by the food industry because it grows wild for free and cannot be monetized. Every pond in America is growing it right now. And this is the most underutilized food source on this list and possibly on Earth. And the only reason you didn't know is that there's no profit in telling you. 10 crops. everyone producing more food per square foot per acre or per pound than what the industrial food system sends to your grocery store. Kale and tree collards delivering more micronutrient density per square foot than any commercial green, continuously for a decade from one planting, on 0 inputs. Sweet potatoes producing 800 to 1,200 calories per square foot in warm climates from vines that root themselves as they grow. Winter squash converting one seed into 9,000 to 13,000 calories of shelf-stable food that stores for up to a year without electricity. Cowpeas producing heat-tolerant, drought-resistant protein that builds the soil as it grows and stores for 3 years without refrigeration. Potato towers generating 10 to 54 times more food per square foot than flat field production from the same planting. Amaranth, the complete protein grain an empire burned fields to suppress, growing in every climate zone in America on soil industrial crops would refuse. Moringa, delivering more of every critical micronutrient than oranges, milk, bananas, yogurt, and spinach simultaneously, from a tree that grows on the worst soil with 0 maintenance. Sunchokes outproducing potatoes 3 to 1 without irrigation, perennial, self-spreading, storing in the ground all winter with no infrastructure required. Cattails producing 6,475 pounds of flour, equivalent per acre, from plants already growing in the ditch at the end of your street that nobody planted and nobody maintains. And duckweed, 45% protein, doubling every 48 hours, producing 35 times more protein per acre than soybeans, from the surface of water that takes up no farmland and costs nothing to establish. These crops exist. The data is documented. Most of them are available right now from nurseries, seed suppliers, or the ponds and wetlands within walking distance of your property. The food system supplying your grocery store runs on fossil fuel inputs, a 3-day inventory cycle, and the assumption that every link in the chain holds simultaneously. It has held so far. But the people not dependent on that assumption are the ones who already have something in the ground. Now, what are you planting first? Drop it in the comments. And if you want the full grow guides for each of these crops, because everyone deserves its own video, hit subscribe. This is the content that doesn't get pushed by algorithms, and the only way you see the next one is if you're already here when it drops.